when we're working through challenges like and how we come to the table with them, it is really an exercise of how we handle ourselves from the day to day. And one thing I would mention is every little thing adds up because you are reframing your response and de-escalating your response when the little things happen. Because I feel like most leaders feel like they have to know everything. They feel like they have to present themselves that they know everything to their team. Otherwise, they're going to create a lack of confidence.
I'm so happy to have you on the show today, Lindsay. And let's see where we're going to go. I know that you are a heart-led entrepreneur, and I really want you to talk about that a little bit with the audience, with the listeners. If you can just share a little bit about your journey as a heart-led business owner, that would be lovely to start with.
Yeah, that could be an episode in and of itself. My journey has definitely been a wild ride. So, as you know, I lead a tech company in the HR space. So we're helping digitize the way that people find and recruit talent, and it's interesting because I think the HR space does have a lot of female leaders in it, but I would say there always can be more. I've seen it grow over the time that I've been in it. To me, like obviously a man can also lead in a heart-centered way. I do feel like it's kind of that feminine energy that will take us there and kind of be the driving force. I feel like it's much more of a conversation now in general than it used to be. And I think a lot of that has been the huge pendulum shift in power, if you will, and employees demanding, especially post-COVID, if you will. I mean, that their needs be met in a bigger, deeper way. And so I think that to some extent it's been forced. For me, it's been a natural flow. I think leading in a heart-centered way was very resonant for me and came very natural for me after Roger, our CEO, and the love of my life, my spouse, all the things passed away. Because one thing that grief does for you is it reframes everything and what actually means something and what actually should be important. And you look at things through a different lens. And so for me, that was a big catalyst behind a shift. I mean, I've definitely always been, an empath, and, other people's feelings have always been very important to me. And I do feel that all business is relationship driven, whether it's your internal, and the way you lead an organization or the way you are, facing with your customers. At the end of the day, it's all relationship, and we all can get a product or a service from anywhere, right? I mean, so you want to go where you feel the most seen and comfortable. And so I think that starting from the inside out just makes sense. And I think more and more organizations are starting to see that, and I'm seeing a huge rise, at least in our space. And I think it's across the board, and more females in the C-suite and more of a focus around the people and not just counting people as a number or a social security number, but truly diving into the people. And that's so critical, especially when you think about like the history, the knowledge behind the products of your organization. Having that like foundational element of long-term employees is so important.
I
So that
love
was a
that.
very long answer to your
No, I love
question.
that. I was noting as you were speaking, and I guess you kind of answered that question already, but how do you personally define a like like a heart-led business, or the leadership that leads from the heart?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to, I mean, you can say that, you can act like it in the day to day, but I think when it really comes down to it, when stuff hits the fan, if there's challenges within the organization, or probably even more than that, if a particular employee that's been with you for a long time is going through something and can't be as present or needs some grace and flexibility, to be able to recognize that and not only formulate things in a very set way, like not necessarily everything has to be like quote unquote by the book, but like really working with people through their challenges and being able to meet them where they're at. I think that's when like the rubber really meets the road. You can act like that from a day-to-day perspective and certainly carry that like into your meetings with your staff and things. But I think if when somebody's going through something, or if there's turbulence or challenges, I mean every business has spikes, there's ebbs and flows, that's just natural. Like when you're going through those things, what does that look like, and who are you putting first, and how are you carrying yourself when things get tough? I mean, it's very similar to how we handle ourselves in our relationships when we bring emotional intelligence to the table, and aren't reactive but process. And that could be taken into consideration, like if an employee sends an email you think is like a little too edgy, or like got a little too much heat behind it or something like that, like just slowing your roll, not responding right away, hitting the pause button, waiting 24 hours, and really digesting and think about, okay, what is that person going through right now, and how can I bring grace to this situation, and try to de-escalate the flame of the fire versus adding more fuel onto it. So another long-winded answer. But
No, I love that. Um, Again, a couple of things came to mind as you were speaking, and I want to ask you this before we jump into the next question. You did mention that when shit hits the fan, you really kind of very quickly realize what's really important. It's just like even, and if anything happens to you, like you go back to your core and you see what is important. And I do believe that our instances when I'm thinking I'm gonna die, for example, I'm on a plane. I'm like super nervous flyer, so I'm like every time I'm boarding in a plane, I got into a point where okay, if turbulence happens, I'm gonna be panicking, but I'm gonna go back to my core really quickly, and I'm gonna get a glimmer again. I'm gonna remember again. So now, because it's almost like all the layers are done, and it's just back to your core and what's important, and you go through it like in instances, right? And it's love, by the way. I don't know what it is.
yes,
I think it's just at the core of everything. Everything. I
yes,
don't know. I think every emotion is like love. Even
yeah.
sadness, anger is
Love or
love.
fear, like everything's either from love or fear.
Yeah. But at the same time, those glimmers when we see like what's important. And I just want to ask you, like, what was that you realized that okay, this is important versus okay, I thought that this was, but it's really not.
Yeah, that's obviously a really big question. I think
Mm-hmm.
the way you asked it, and thinking about your experiences, like with the flight, for example, did bring up another thought too, that these things, when we're working through challenges, like, and how we come to the table with them, it is really an exercise of how we handle ourselves from the day to day. And one thing I would mention is every little thing adds up, because you are reframing your response and de-escalating your response when the little things happen. Like back to the email example that I was mentioning, like instead of flying out the handle, if you like take a deep breath and respond. What's really interesting and what I've noticed, and I will get to your question, but is that it doesn't even have to be a big thing. It starts foundationally with the little things, and the more you kind of force yourself, if you will, to come at things with that more intentional response, the more it happens naturally, and therefore the less panicked you are when shit really does go down. And it's like you've retrained your brain and your nervous system to deal with things differently. And I think that's really important. I think for me, I know you know my story because we know each other. But for me, grief was that catalyst, that recalibration, that big bang moment. I don't think you necessarily have to have that, but that reframed a lot of things. I mean, like there were obvious, you do life, and there's like things that Roger and I thought were important, like where we live, or the house we're in, or all these things, or what's going on with this customer, or this aspect of the business. And at the end of the day, when you experience the passing of somebody that's, especially somebody that's part of your every single day, in many cases for me at least, like every minute of every day pretty much, it reshapes what's important. And also you realize the things that you look back on. I was just talking to a friend about this the other day, and who also lost her husband, and we were saying how like some of the times when we were like the most stressed, or really like going through something, like those are like some of the best memories, how we like persevered and we did the thing, and we, but like, and you look back on it and like how your response was, or how your, spouse's response was. And it's like, those are some of the best memories. So it doesn't all have to be rainbows and unicorns for there to be like joy in it, and being able to kind of hold both.
I love that. I think when you were just saying that, it does seem like you have to have a great mindset to look at the lessons in the bad things, because in the good things it's easy. Like you're like, okay, but in the bad things, it takes some serious thinking, like, okay, what
Yes.
did I learn from
Well,
this?
and I
Yeah.
think, the more you reframe the quote unquote bad things too, or challenges, like the more it starts to happen naturally for you, where you're like, I've noticed that my immediate like response or reaction to something isn't like, oh, why did this happen? It's like, okay, there's a reason. I know there's a bigger plan behind this. I just don't know the why yet.
Oh my God, that's so wise to do that. But you're like, okay, there's a bigger lesson here. I mean, it's amazing, by the way, to be able to do that. And there is the empowerment, dynamic. There is the drama triangle and the empowerment dynamic, and it's basically, I don't know if you know the drama triangle. It has the victim, the rescuer, and the persecutor, and basically, the theory is that we go through, if we are in the drama triangle, either we're victim, like oh poor me, life happens to me. We are persecuting when we are blaming, like it's your fault, like this happened to me, right? And then rescuing is like I'm gonna fix it for you, but it's not because of you, because I want to feel better about myself. And
Right.
so the empowerment triangle is basically the victim becomes the challenger, and then that is like, okay, what did I learn from this, and what are the lessons are from me, and what options do I have, right? And in each role, for example, the rescuer becomes like, okay, I believe in my power, and I believe in other people's power, so that if I can do it, they can do it, so I don't have to save them. So again, I think even if you don't know, I think you're doing the empowerment triangle yourself, and you're like flipping the coin. Like basically, that's what you are doing and practicing by recognizing the lesson, Because I think there has to be a time when I'm like, okay, I'm a victim, poor me. I feel sorry for myself. Like I can't believe this happening to me. That is a process of like coming to, okay, what was the lesson here, and that takes time. And like you said, it trains your nervous system to be getting there.
Yeah, it helps you regulate more on your own, and I think it just shortens the time around each of the cycles that you might emotionally go through too, when something happens. And when you can do that for yourself, you bring that to your relationships. And, part of that is obviously leadership. And if you've got, people that report into you, and you're bringing that, type of ability with those relationships, it just helps everybody else regulate better too. Like firm believer that everything relates to energetics, and at the end of the day, that's what we are, is the energy that we bring to the table. And I think when you lead yourself that way and you lead your teams that way, then you set the standard for what's acceptable in the organization and how people should treat each other, and it impacts the teams and the breakdown of the teams within your organization too.
I love that you share that because oftentimes I'm having client meetings and sometimes I go to their team to just be there as the marketing person and like listen to the whole conversation. And a lot of the times I'm still seeing the traditional leadership, the I'm gonna put you in your spot so you learn a lesson. It's not the it's like the people fearing the person. Like they don't even want to unmute themselves to say anything because
Yeah.
they are just like they don't want to be put in the spot. They don't want to be yelled at. They don't want to be like just feeling this discomfort and fear. Like when are they gonna lose their job? And I love
Yeah.
that you said that there can be leadership where it's not based on fear, and it's not how we can get respect. I don't even know what is it that when they're needing, but what is your take on those traditional leadership, scenarios?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think I'm going to add to that too. That I think that fear can be involved when you're not necessarily even trying for it to be. So I know, like in the past, for me, like I'm a very high drive type A person, and I've shifted that a lot as well over the last few years, where I'm like more a balance now of like go flow, like kind of back and forth, like do the work, let it happen, and being able to release the outcomes. But with like kind of that natural like drive that I do have and that I've always had, I think I've heard over the years that like people were afraid of me, and that always shocked me because I've always tried to be like kind above all
And you're so
else.
cute on top of that. I don't even know what it is.
Thank you. But I've heard it before. So I think like sometimes when you, and it was more than once. So I think sometimes when you come to the table and like you're very high drive, you can unknowingly, certainly unintentionally, create fear because like you might like people maybe have a perfectionist like type of a feel like they need to hit certain things with you because they see how how you expect for yourself. That's what I theorize about it. But so I think you can bring fear to the table even unintentionally is my point with this. And to me, I think about, people like Brené Brown and like the impact of vulnerability, and having those honest conversations with people is the easiest way to really kind of try to take fear out of it. Because if you're vulnerable, raw, and transparent with your people, and I'm not saying you have to tell every aspect of your personal life or anything like that as a leader, but if you come to it with authenticity and vulnerability, like if there's a situation you're like, I don't know, I'm going to have to think about this, I'm going to have to really process this, like I'm not sure what we're going to do next, and I welcome your opinions, for example. Um, if you come at it with that, I think that it's funny because I feel like most leaders feel like they have to know everything. They feel like they have to present themselves that they know everything to their team. Otherwise, they're going to create a lack of confidence, when it actually can be the exact opposite, and oftentimes is. Like the more you open yourself up to say, like, I'm not exactly sure how we're going to navigate this situation, or, deal with what's going on like right now in the market or whatever it might be. But I'm here. I'm going to do everything in my control to help us be successful, and I welcome your thoughts and opinions on it. With that type of a more open conversation, a vulnerable conversation, I think you always decrease fear. And it's funny because, like, people want to know that, like, you're real, And I feel like when you come to the table with authenticity and transparency, even when you're not confident or don't have all the answers, that actually translates so much better to people than like trying to force something down their throat that they know isn't like real and that they don't feel confident that you know what you're doing. If that makes sense.
I love that. And I think, again, as you were speaking, it made so much sense. This vulnerability aspect, that often there's a fear that unless I know it all, I cannot be a leader. I have to know it all. Like I cannot show that I don't know. There's a book called The Hard Thing About the Hard Things, and it's just about this. And it's about how to be honest as a leader. And it was a tech company that was like getting bankrupt, and then the owner didn't want to tell anyone, the team, that things are not going well, because he thought that as a leader he should know better and should not share these things, shelter people from the reality of the business. And yeah, I think that's such an important thing, to have those conversations. What would you be saying to leaders that are not leading organizations, but leading, for example, masterminds, programs, then they are paid to be there. It's an opposite game. Can they show that they don't know all the answers? Like, what do you think about those scenarios?
100%. I think, like, for me, I wouldn't hire somebody as a coach or mastermind or to learn from if I didn't also think they were constantly learning themselves. And we all bring a different lens of experiences to every interaction, regardless of age, demographic. Like, every one of us brings different elements. Your lived experiences are completely different than my lived experiences. So to think that just because you're, leading a mastermind or coaching somebody, that they can't also help you, I think is naive and limits your ability to learn. And at the end of the day, I don't know about you, but I'm here, like, I'm 100% here to learn, and that's why we're in these earth suits, is to learn and achieve the purposes that we were created to achieve. And I think that we hinder that process when we limit who we can learn from. And we can all learn from each other in different containers, even if we are the quote unquote leader of those containers.
Yeah, I love that. Did you ever feel pressure to be having it all together as a leader?
Um, Probably before going through loss. Yeah, probably before going through loss. And I think just as a gender, we that identify as female tend to be worse at that, feeling like we have to have everything 100% all together, which obviously no one ever is going to have 100% all together, nor are we going to feel like we do. So it's an unattainable bar that we set. And I think once you let go of that and recognize that nobody does have it all together, and that the world needs more female representation from a leadership perspective and more of that feminine coming into it, I think it's freeing in a lot of ways, because nobody knows the answers, and we're all here just navigating and doing the best we can to navigate. So once you set that expectation, you allow yourself room for making mistakes and growing from that.
I love that. I want to kind of circle back to what you said before about, you said that in a hard-led business, if an employee is going through something, there is a communication and a compassion about, that they can share what's happening. Maybe it affects your performance at work. What do you think is, and I want to say this because my partner specifically, he has his own employees, and I feel like I know everything about them and their drama and everything. There's a lot of compassion from his and empathy, and I love that he has all of that empathy for the employees. But at the same time, I feel like it's getting out of control in a way that he's going into their personal life too much. They share weird details, her daughter is having an abortion, so they need some money. I don't know, things like that. They come too personal. So what do you think is the line and between the employees being vulnerable and listening and being compassionate versus going overboard and really caring too much and giving them too much of our compassion?
Yeah, I mean that's a complicated question for sure. I think that for everybody, what that line's going to feel like is different because your own boundaries are probably different. For me, I know enough about what's going on with our employees, but not like an overabundance of knowledge where it's like, okay, I didn't need to know that. um, I would say like it's a little bit arm's length, but just knowing enough to like if somebody if one of your leaders like just had a baby or they that that they have a parent that's ill or terminally ill, for example, like just I think that is enough. Like most employees in the course of conversations, you learn those types of core to their daily activities things, and I think that is enough to bring that level of grace to the table and be able to give consideration. Like I've got one employee who's phenomenal and just always worried about letting me know if she's going to be like out doing something with one of her kids for a couple hours or whatever the case might be, but she's getting her work done, so like you don't need to check in with me to that extent, and I think
Mm.
that's like the balance too, right? Is are they showing up and delivering? And if they're showing up and delivering, my thought process always is like, we're good, like I'm not gonna micromanage. You either can do your job and are, capable of performing, or you're not. Like me micromanaging you isn't gonna help your performance.
I love
so,
that.
yeah, so I think that's part of the balance too.
I love that you mentioned that as well because you as a leader, you don't need to be updated on every single thing, right? Because,
No.
and that goes back to the empowerment triangle. Like, I trust in your power, I trust that you got it, so you got it. And that,
Yeah.
I love that you master that.
Yeah, which can be super freeing for you as a leader too, because you're freeing up your time, and also if your employees see that's how you handle yourself, then everybody that reports into them, they're going to give them that same ability to manage their calendars and their task. So it definitely does go for full circle within the organization.
Did it take you time to start trusting the people that you hired?
Yes. I think, most of our team have been with us for over 5 years. A lot of them are close to the 10-year mark. So, like there's 100% trust. But yeah, I mean, and for me, like being, a recovering type A, like it's, the testing things at the beginning, it's the testing things with small doses. I would say I'm much better at that now than I used to be. Like, I just don't sweat a lot of those like detail things, unless somebody gives me a reason to. So
Mm. So you came far, basically.
yes, yes. This used to be a real struggle.
Yeah, but you also have different things that you want to focus on, so that really frees up your time, right? To be letting people do their things, and
Mhm.
trusting that they are doing it. If they're not doing it, you'll figure it out anyway.
Exactly.
I love that. Where I wanted to go from here is you mentioned being an empath, and that's interesting to me because, and again, I don't know if you tend to experience that, but you tend to open up people easily. So that's why I was asking, like, so what is the fine line for you? Because, people can share things sometimes that it's way too much information, and you don't even need to know because of your nature of being an empath.
Yeah. I think a lot of that is guiding the conversation. Like, if it starts to go, a little too detailed, a little more information than you want, maybe just like gently circle it back to like a work question or a task that they have on their plate. Like, there's ways that you can do it without making the person feel bad or uncomfortable that they just shared with you. I think there's ways to do it that are much more subtle and just make everybody more comfortable. But then that they're like that starts to set up some boundaries for them too.
I love that. I want to ask you this. What was your biggest fuck up as a leader?
Oh God, TBD. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say I probably the thing that comes to mind first would be like just in the past, just being like super hyper vigilant about everything and feeling like I just needed to know, and that really
Mm,
stemmed from like control, and just I think releasing that has been huge. But I look how uptight like I was when I was living and leading that way, and it's so much better health wise too to like not lead like that. So I guess I think I would say that.
mm, I love that. Like you, I mean, right now as we're having this conversation, I can tell you're very chill about that. You release a lot of control, and I think maybe that's also part of your journey. And I know that you are you're practicing, you're a Reiki healer, or you're doing that actively still. Can you talk a little bit
Yes.
about that as well?
Yeah. So, my side gig is, besides running the tech company, I am a grief coach, and I'm trained in somatic healing and in Reiki. The training program I went through is a Reiki master that is very intuitive based, so pulls in a lot of mediumistic abilities, and it's interesting because it actually does 100% layer into leading the tech company too, because like what I feel in my body, like I can do these things to myself, right? And I could be like, okay, if I'm starting to get upset about something, like, okay, do these things to regulate. Um, but yeah, it's amazing how much energy we store and hold in the different parts of our body, both like just like in our physical body as well as like our chakra points that can lead to things with our physical body. And being able to release that has an enormous impact. And I love being able to see the freeing aspect actually of that healing with the people that I work with. It's pretty awesome.
I love that. And I wanted to ask you a couple of emotions that I think most entrepreneurs, like in leadership, feel. And maybe I want to ask your take on that, in identifying those emotions, and maybe if you can give some tips on processing them and for the listeners. So the first one is overwhelm.
Yeah, I know it's completely counterintuitive. Overwhelm is so common. And I would say, like, if you've been through any type of trauma or grief, going into overwhelm happens like snap of the fingers. I mean, just so much faster. But a couple tools that I use when I'm like feel myself in a state of overwhelm. Number one, step away. So I know it's counterintuitive because it's like, no, I have to do all the things, but you don't have to do any of the things. Just like take a minute, take a beat. I do like the box breathing, the 4x4. For those who don't know box breathing, it's inhale for a 4 count, hold for a 4 count, exhale for a 4 count, and hold for a 4 count. Doing that for just like 4 or 5 cycles is definitely a game changer. Going for a super short walk, another great way to self-regulate and get yourself back to a better spot. And then just creating a little bit of time and space between whatever's making you feel overwhelmed is huge. I always find that my response to something 24 hours later is completely different and always 110% better than if I had fired something off or made the call in the heat of the moment when I was feeling overwhelmed. So, as hard as it is, I think when you're in that state of overwhelm to try to create some time and space, it is so, so important. And the result is going to be better for it. So, even though you might feel like you have to like cram and get all the things done, just do yourself that favor because the outcome's going to be so much better.
I love that. Exhaustion.
I Sleep is a priority to me, and I do not think, in general, as a culture, we prioritize sleep. I've listened to a lot of like self-help type like podcast, audibles, all the things. And, you're useless without a good night's sleep. And a lot of the things that I listen to talk about how we glorify, getting 4 hours sleep or whatever, which is just crazy to me. To me, like, and especially, with grief and trauma, like, you have to prioritize sleep because nothing like puts you into that overwhelmed state faster than lack of sleep. So the two definitely go hand in hand. But so for me, it's carving out, like, my phone is on silent at 9 o'clock at night. Like, I will not hear your text. I will not hear your ding, like whatever it is, like I will not hear it after 9 o'clock at night, because that's my time. And, I'm a big meditator. You don't have to meditate long, but 5 to 10 minutes helps your body like go into that state of like pre-sleep and, kind of downshift a little bit before you actually go to bed. But yeah, I mean, I treat sleep like a religion, like I treat my workouts, like it's completely protected and it's going to happen. I do require 8 hours. So that's just a non-negotiable for me. And I think that a lot of people could use to implement something like that. Maybe it's not 8 hours for you. Some people need 10. Some people only need 7. But feeling into your body and what that looks like for you, and then make it a non-negotiable.
Fear.
That's the biggest one, right? I think, we talked about that a lot, I think, throughout the conversation today. And a lot of it does start with the little things and reframing your mind not to freak out at the little things will make it more of an automatic process when the big stuff goes down. So practicing that day to day, whether it's like running late and you feel yourself going into that state of panic, like just, like creating some self-regulation and doing some breath work and just reframing that it's really not that big a deal. Taking the time in those moments when it's the little things will 100% help you overcome fear when it feels like something big later.
I love that. And I think, yeah, like you said, throughout this conversation, we did mention a lot, on processing those emotions. I'm going to say the last one to be burnout, but I'm not sure if that's emotion-wise, like if that ever happens to a leader. What do you think is the best way for them to, what to do about it, basically?
Yeah, I think if you get to that point, and you haven't created boundaries to prevent it up until that point, like it happened and it's too late, just learning from it and setting up boundaries, success doesn't look like working 24/7. And I know when like you're starting and leading a company, you work a lot of hours and that's just natural, but you have to have time for you, because if you're not healthy, it doesn't matter. None of it matters if you're not healthy, and you can't be there to run your organization if you are not healthy and mentally sound. And so in order to do that, you have to protect your health, your body, doing things like moving and, whether that's exercise or just like being out in nature, those types of things. And then obviously your sleep, like we talked about, like those key things are so important to preventing burnout.
I love that. So basically just take care of ourselves, prioritizing our health so that we can show up for our businesses.
Yeah.
One advice that you would give to your younger self?
Probably just to suck up and be in every moment. That it's so easy to get distracted, like it's always like squirrel, right? But I think just being present.
Do you actively practice being present, or do you feel yourself like, oh, I need to be present here, or your mind tends to shift? No.
That's one of those things, again, like the more you practice it, the more it happens naturally. I don't have to really force it anymore. But if like especially early on, if I felt myself like kind of getting distracted or doing, multiple, the staff has always teased me over the years that like I am like the queen of like multitasking, and like legitimately all totally multitasking and like doing the things. But I think the more that you stop yourself from doing that and the more that you're like really truly in the moment, you get to see things for more of what they actually are, and you miss a lot less. And to my point earlier, like some of the things that at the end of the day are most important to you and that are you look back on the like with the fondest way can be things that you would never have thought that when you were in the moment. So, but you have to be in the moment to be able to remember them. So, yeah.
I know, and I just want to add to that that sometimes being present is not a fun thing, and I'm like, again, on the plane ride, it's turbulent, and I don't want to be present here, And and like you said, after the lessons come, obviously the downloads, everything, you see what's important and what's not. But man, it's so hard to be present. Sometimes present is not cool. It's not a
Yeah.
fun place to be. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Like, what are your plans as far as, I'm sure you're gonna keep leading your business, but I'm just curious to know about your future goals.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of like 5, 10 year
Hmm.
self projections just because
We
one
just
of
talked
the
about being present, great.
yes, exactly. One of the things that I've learned is like just to be in the moment. And I think that's definitely something that if you are dealing with grief, looking too far down the road can definitely trigger, feelings of overwhelm and sadness. But I think for me, I definitely see that I'm going to be kind of drawn more into helping people, especially like with the grief coaching and continuing to balance that with leading an organization. I think more and more opportunities on that front to be of service and, to really help people is going to be something that's takes a more active role in my life for sure.
Yeah, and I love that. Um, just to finish our episode, but I think because we talked about so many things, but I think if I had to really summarize it, it's really to be present, and that's our message for today. Thank you so much for coming, Lindsay, and for your time and for all the wisdom. I'm sure that all the leaders can learn from you, not just like how to be leaders, but how to be leaders with a heart, with empathy, with compassion. So I'm just so grateful for this one, and thanks so much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy listening to your episodes, so it was so nice to have the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.